A rising young architect named Susie returns to her small hometown in Maine for Christmas, where she follows her grandmother's footsteps and enters a local gingerbread competition. In the opening scene, we see a young Susie making a gingerbread house with her grandma. She tells us that her grandmother used to call her the perfect star-shaped cookie because she's sweet and likes to shine. However, Susie compares her grandmother to spicy dumplings, soft, juicy, and full of flavor. Young Susie struggles to keep the gingerbread in shape and wishes to become an architect when she grows up. Seeing her beloved grandchild lose her confidence as the gingerbread house starts falling apart, she reminds her that when she first came to the country she didn't even know what a gingerbread house was. However, she worked hard and never gave up, and even became the Gingerlicious baking champion. Taking a gingerbread cookie, she asks young Susie to make a wish, and as they break the cookie, her grandma gets the bigger half. Despite losing, Susie's grandma reveals that her wish had been for her to be forever happy. Before we're taken to the present, Susie lets us know about her grandmother's famous saying, "Life is too short to eat stale cookies." The scene cuts and we see a grown-up Susie, who's already become an architect, enter the building with cookies in her hand. Setting the cookies down, she gets approached by her assistant Alyssa. Alyssa, being the comforting person she is compared to a homemade rum raisin cookie. She complains about the party not having karaoke, but Susie lets her know that there's nothing more she hates than singing in public. Alyssa asks her about some of the men in the office, but Susie compares them to some desserts she doesn't like, such as comparing the new guy to a scone since he's bland and flavorless. Susie is waiting for a promotion and the realization of it suddenly scares her. However, her assistant is here to assure her that she's the only one who deserves it. So she decides to head to her boss's office to see what the situation is like. Entering the office, she's immediately greeted with the bluntness of her boss, which is why Susie compares her to a peanut brittle. Marshall walks in as well, and her boss reveals that the both of them won't be getting the promotion because there could only be one. The project is due New Year's, which is tricky for Susie, but she promises to have it done. Going back to her desk, Susie starts working on the plan while trying to incorporate a classroom space in a community center. Realizing that Susie is always working, Alyssa asks her to promise that she'll have fun. They clink their drinks and promise each other to have a wonderful time. Arriving in the town, Susie makes her way to her parents' bar, where she's surprised to see an old friend of hers. Entering the bar, she sees her old friend Billy Martin, who she compares to a jelly donut, messy, sweet, and full of surprises. He lets the crowd know that the Gingerlicious competition has been sponsored and the winner will get $15,000. Her parents notice Susie and the crows and immediately go to her. Susie's parents are quite the opposite. Her dad is kettle corn since he's a crowd pleaser, and her mother is a brownie, sweet but bitter. Billy encourages the crowd that they'll win when he spots Susie in the crowd as well. Instantly, he remembers Susie's baking skills, so he calls her on the stage. Dragged to the stage by her parents, Susie gets confused and doesn't know what to say. She lets the crowd know that she has work to do, meaning that she wouldn't be able to participate in the project. Billy pokes fun at her for still being bad about the science project, but Susie argues back. He finally accepts the fact that she won't be joining but pulls a trick on her. He asks the crowd to chant "Do It for Nana," so Susie is forced to agree. Later in the evening, Susie is sitting by a bar when her brother approaches her. He knows that Susie's been wanting to win a baking competition since she was little, so he wonders whether Billy's the problem and their rocky relationship. However, Susie assures him that he's not, but doesn't like that he's a troublemaker. Annie, Wayne's wife, joins them, and same as her husband, she thinks that Susie has a problem with Billy. After the gathering, Susie tries to walk home, but her mother doesn't let her, claiming that it's too dangerous for a girl to walk alone. Susie assures her that she'll be fine, but Billy chimes in, offering to walk with her. On their way to her house, they talk about their careers and Susie's big promotion. She assumes that he has given up his career and returned to town, but he lets her know that he's put it on pause. Being a hard worker her whole life, Susie advises him to never stop, but he reminds her that life is more than getting a gold star. They get to Susie's house, and as Billy's telling her about the competition, her mother opens the door and drags her inside. She warns her to stay away from him since he's been heartbreaking through town. Before Susie goes to bed, she enjoys her mother's noodles and pork buns. Her mother takes her to her grandmother's room where Susie can enjoy all of her stuff. Susie gets saddened because all her grandma wanted was for them to win the competition together, but now Susie's on her own. Despite not fulfilling her wishes, Susie's mother assures her that she would have been proud. Later in the night, Susie struggles to fall asleep, so she heads to the kitchen for a snack. Sitting by the counter, she suddenly sees her grandmother in front of her. Grandmother hands her the rolling pin Susie had made for her and asks her to use it. A batch of fresh cookies sits on the counter, so her grandmother hands her one. No matter how hard Susie tries, she can never make the cookies as good as her grandmother's. Just as she's about to discover the secret ingredient, her alarm rings, and she realizes it was just a dream. Taking the dream as a message from her grandmother, Susie heads to the bake-off where she finds Billy and shares the good news with him. Billy asks her if that's what she wants, and Susie assures him that her grandma would have been disappointed if she didn't participate. Looking over his shoulder, she sees a poster on the door. Billy lets her know that he's doing a toy drive as a charity for the struggling families, and she pokes fun at him for trying to get off the naughty list. Walking into the hall, Susie is impressed by the look of it, but once she sees Caitlin, she stops. Caitlin was the homecoming queen who Susie compares to a vanilla cupcake with sprinkles on top. She is the one who tormented Susie in high school, and Susie doesn't seem to have forgotten that, but Billy assures her that she's changed. Caitlin comes running to Susie to hug her, and as she does, she apologizes for being mean to her but blames it on her lactose intolerance. Another person from their team is Stavros, who Susie compares to a bear claw, a dessert that is puffy on the outside but sweet and soft on the inside. The teammates are experienced in baking, and that's why they make the perfect team. Susie promises to do everything she can to win the competition, as she needs to honor her grandma. Billy lets them know about the changes in the competition. Now that it's sponsored, the competition will be held in 3 rounds in 4 days, the final round being on Christmas Eve. Since they won't know what to bake until the competition starts, Susie suggests they practice by making some dessert beforehand. She suggests they start with the standard Tudor fairytale 1-story, rice checks thatched roof, gumdrop chimney, and candy cane street lamps. The team works together and they finish with a gorgeous-looking gingerbread house. Even though the chimney falls off, they're positive that it would be better for the competition. Susie receives a text from her boss asking about the project, and it ruins her mood. Billy invites her to a concert, but she declines his offer as she has to focus on her work for the promotion. However, she doesn't manage to get much done as her brother begs her to take his kids shopping since he got called to teach a yoga class the next minute. Despite saying no, Susie wants to fulfill the kids' wishes, so she takes them there. As she's on the phone call with her boss, the kids wander off somewhere else. Worried, she searches for them when a snowball hits her suddenly. Turning around, she sees Billy with a guilty look on his face, but luckily for her, the kids come by and join her against him in a snowball fight. The fun takes over them, and suddenly Susie and Billy are holding and looking deeply into each other's eyes. After walking around, Susie and Billy sit down for a while. Seeing him greet a lot of girls reminds her of her mother's words about him being a heartbreaker, so she decides to ask him about it. He admits to being labeled as such because he hasn't met anyone serious. He asks her the same question, and she reveals that work is her main focus but wants something perfect in the future. The kids come back to ask Susie whether they can go to Billy's store, and being the great aunt she is, she says yes. In the store, the kids run around looking at all the colorful toys there while Billy and Susie go in the back. Entering the back, Susie can't help but ask about the robot that's sitting on his desk. He lets her know that he's designing a robot buddy that will send voicemails but isn't sure whether to be serious about it. Being in the architecture world, Susie knows a lot of CEOs and she offers to help pitch his idea to one, but he lets her know that he's not interested. He reveals that he hadn't only come back to town for his father's death, but because he wasn't happy doing what he did. She thinks he's settling for less but assures her he's searching for more. In the end, Susie doesn't listen to Billy as she decides to take a picture of the robot and send it to her CEO friend, thinking that he would be grateful one day. Returning home, Susie can't seem to focus on her work as a lot of thoughts flood her head. All of a sudden, a plate of cookies is placed in front of her and she sees her grandma. Being honest with her, she lets her know that she's confused about everything, but her grandma advises her to only listen to herself, as some cookies are better without a recipe to follow. Snapping back to reality, Susie sees her mother standing in front of her as she reminds her that the competition will start soon. Before going to the competition, Susie prays to her grandmother's picture as she lights up a fragrance stick. Susie arrives at the bake-off positively, but they soon meet the DuPont twins, who are rather rude and very competitive. Finally, the town's mayor comes out to let them know about the competition and its prizes before introducing the first challenge. Cookie Kickoff is the first challenge, and the competitors must make 3 dozen cookies, each of them being a different flavor, and at least one of them has to contain ginger as a main spice. The team settles on making traditional cookies, and soon enough they have trays of delicious cookies for the judges to taste. The Meguiers and their grandchildren come by their station, and they're presented with gingerbread men, candy cane sugar cookies, and caramel shortbread commies. They end up liking the cookies, but what bugs Susie the most is the fact that they love DuPont's unique cookies. Despite loving DuPont's cookies more, Susie and her team manage to get to the second round with 3rd place. Susie is visibly upset about it and blames herself for it. She is always afraid to leave her comfort zone, and that is why the DuPonts were better. Knowing that singing has always been her worst nightmare, he asks her to sing on stage in front of everyone just to loosen up a bit. Realizing that she's being challenged, Susie accepts the challenge and gets on stage, but she still looks shy. Billy gets on stage so she can relax a bit, and as he dances silly, she manages to sing the Christmas song beautifully. After the singing is over, Billy lets Susie know that he's glad she came back, and she feels the same way. Their conversation is interrupted by Susie's phone ringing, and once she answers, she finds out that the project had been moved to Christmas Day, and she only had 3 days to finish it. She excuses herself and apologizes to Billy for leaving before heading off. The next round of the competition came, but there was some trouble for Susie's team. Arriving at their station, Billy and Caitlin let Susie know that Stavros had a family emergency. Therefore, he couldn't join them, which makes it harder since there are only 3 people. Despite the problem they're facing, Susie is positive and assures her partners that they will work hard and win the round. The mayor comes in once again to introduce the challenge. The challenge is to make gingerbread. They have to use at least 3 types of dough, and ginger is their main spice. Teeth's biggest catch, though, is for them to make a gingerbread sculpture of their favorite Christmas character. They prepare in good spirits, but unfortunately, Billy ends up dropping Susie's special rolling pin that she got from her grandmother. Devastated, Susie picks it up with tears in her eyes but remembers that the competition is going on, so she asks everyone to go back to work. Their time ends and once again they have to present their specialties to the Megwares. The DuPont twins seem to have aced the challenge with a rock and roll Santa, but when it comes to Susie's team, they don't get the feedback they want. They present the pickled ginger and olive rye, which everyone seems to love, but once they try the second baked good, the kids say that it's gross while the adults struggle to say anything good about it. Confused, Susie tries the dessert herself and it turns out that she added salt instead of sugar. She gets upset and is sure that they're going to lose, but Caitlin and Billy assure her that the other recipes were good. Unfortunately, the team doesn't make it to the next round, which leaves Susie disappointed in herself. Later in the night, Susie doesn't seem to be over the fact that they've lost as she repeatedly apologizes to her nana while looking at the broken rolling pin. Her phone ringing snaps her out of her thoughts, and it's Billy asking her to come to the community center. She rushes there only to be greeted by a lovely decorated Jim and Billy in a tuxedo. He lets her know that her being upset about the contest had inspired him to set the whole thing up. They didn't get to go to the high school dance together, and the reason for it is because he wanted to be more than friends, but she kept reminding him that they're just friends. To his surprise, Susie reveals that she had a crush on him as well but never told him because he was with another girl. Gathering the courage he didn't have when they were in high school, he finally asks her to dance with him and they dance the night away. Romance fills the room and they're having a blast before an alarming sound goes off, making Susie realize that he had broken into the gym. Luckily, the officer lets them go, but Susie's mother drags her to her car while saying that she's grounded. As Susie's working on her project, the door rings, catching her attention, so she goes to get it. Surprisingly, Billy stands at the door with Christmas presents in his hand, so Susie lets him in. While everyone is surprised to see him, Susie's mother rolls her eyes at the sight of him. Billy stays for lunch and the unthinkable happens. As he compliments the mother's cooking, she asks him to try some stinky tofu. The whole family gets worried as they cover their noses, so they don't smell the fishy smell of the tofu. Surprisingly, instead of hating it, Billy loves the tofu, and that makes Susie's mother love him as well. After enjoying lunch, Billy washes the dishes, which Susie thinks it's just to get her mother to love him more. However, Billy lets her know that her mother requested a loaf of bread before he leaves, so he continues to knead it. As he works on the bread, Susie can't help but notice that his work is perfect, so he asks her to join him. She gets in front of him and he uses his hands to guide hers to make the bread loaf. Given that they're closer to each other, the tension rises in the air and they lean in close for a kiss. However, their kiss is interrupted by the kid giggling in the corner. Putting his coat on ready to leave, Billy notices the laptop on the counter and Susie's sketch on it. He admits to not being experienced in architecture, but he knows that her work is amazing. Before he leaves, he asks Susie to join him as he does deliveries dressed like Santa, and she agrees. However, he doesn't go through the door without Susie's mom giving him a packed dinner with some stinky tofu for later. Returning to the counter, Susie realizes that her laptop had been unplugged and one of her nephews apologizes for using the plug. She lets him know that it's fine, but once she turns on the computer, she realizes that none of her work has been saved. She starts panicking and crying, thinking that everything is ruined. But her mother reminds her that she has always been a strong girl that never gave up, even in the hardest situations. Susie works all night to finish the project, and while she successfully finishes it, she ends up falling asleep on her desk. Waking up in the morning, she realizes that she's late, so she rushes to get to Billy's toy store. She apologizes for being late while explaining her situation, but he jokes around about her being sick of him already. After successfully delivering packages and making the kids happy, Billy and Susie sit down to relax a bit. As they're talking, Susie gets a text message and it's her friend confirming that they like Billy's idea. Excited about the opportunity, she lets Billy know what she had done for him, but he gets upset. He thinks it's wrong that she's gone behind his back, no matter the intention. She doesn't want to believe that he wants to stay and manage his father's job, but he reminds her that it's his choice to make. Instead of arguing some more, Billy wishes her the best for her promotion and leaves her there alone. As if losing the competition and losing Billy as a friend hadn't been enough, Susie gets a text message from Allison apologizing as a video of Marshall plays. Susie realizes that she hasn't got the promotion, and once her father asks her what's wrong, she breaks down in tears as she claims that she has ruined everything. Her father reminds her that it's just life and that no matter what, her grandmother would be proud of trying. He reminds her that the only thing they want from her is to be happy and not worry about life. Her father goes to take a phone call, and after he answers it, he brings back good news. One of the teams had cheated by bringing the kids with sweats and candy, and they were not disqualified, which brings Susie and her team back in the game. Before letting her go get Billy back, her father hands her an old apron of her grandmother's to motivate her to win. Rushing into the shop, Susie lets him know about the wonderful news, but as they're about to leave, the realization hits them. Susie apologizes for doing what she did, and he lets her know that he is not one of her projects. She agrees with him and admits that she shouldn't have done what she did. Revealing that she didn't get the promotion motivates Billy to win the bake-off even more. The competition is about to begin when the mayor comes out to announce the challenge. She lets everyone know that their challenge is to make a gingerbread house that will represent Christmas. As the competition begins, Susie turns to her teammates and asks them what Christmas means to them. For Stavros, Christmas means coming together with the people who care about you, while for Billy, Christmas is all about gift giving. Caitlin loves that people are so much kinder on Christmas, so Susie lets them know that she has just the right idea. All of the teams get together to make the best gingerbread house, and after 4 hours of hard work, they are done. As they finish making the gingerbread house, Susie gets a call from her boss who congratulates her for getting the promotion. Confused, Susie tells her about the video of Marshall popping champagne, but her boss confirms that Marshall was celebrating being engaged. The judging finally reigns, and the first team presents their gingerbread house as the Winter Wonderland, while the twins show love through their gingerbread house. Susie's team presents their gingerbread house as the new community center, as the community is the most important among people. Before the winners announced, Billy lets Susie know that he is proud of their work progress no matter if they win or not. The winner is finally announced, and it's Susie's team. Smiles are plastered on their faces as they get up to the podium to take their gingerbread man medals. As they go on to congratulate each other, Susie stops Billy on the side to tell him about her promotion. Since they won't be in the same place, she suggests they FaceTime and call each other, but Billy lets her know that he doesn't do long distance. Saddened, Susie thinks that it's the end of it all, but he tells her that he's willing to go to Australia with her. That way, he can work on his design and she can pursue her dreams. As they make a plan for the future, they lean in and finally share their first kiss as the crowd cheers. A year later, we see Billy and Susie enter her parents' lobster bar. They're greeted and welcomed by everyone, and Susie makes sure to tell her mother that her cooking is irreplaceable. Even though many years have passed since Nana passed away, Susie keeps the tradition going by putting freshly baked cookies under her picture every time she visits. Her niece and nephew ask them to dance, so Billy and Susie return to the crowd and have the most fun while dancing among their people.